Right now, at this exact moment, if you own a Toyota and you can see oil burning off the back of your exhaust, there is a very good chance you are about to hand over $2,800 or more to a dealership for a repair your engine does not need. Not a partial repair, not an overpriced repair, a completely fabricated repair. And the single most infuriating part of this entire story is that the actual fix costs $5, takes 15 minutes, and requires nothing more than a flathead screwdriver and a tube of sealant you can buy at any auto parts store. The dealership service advisor standing across the counter from you knows this. The technician writing up your estimate knows this. And the corporate training material that taught them both how to diagnose your vehicle absolutely knows this. What you are about to hear is the reason they are counting on the fact that you do not. Let me paint you the exact picture that triggers this scam every single time. You walk out to your driveway in the morning and you notice a dark, oily residue coating the rear of your engine block. It is greasy, it smells like burning oil when the engine warms up, and it is dripping down onto the exhaust manifold where it smokes and sizzles in a way that makes your stomach drop. You take it to the dealership. The service advisor does a visual inspection, sometimes not even a thorough one, and comes back with a clipboard and a number that starts with 2 and ends with something that makes you want to sit down. The diagnosis is almost always the same: blown head gasket, failed rear main seal, catastrophic internal engine sealing failure, requiring a complete motor pull. The paperwork looks official. The mechanic sounds confident, and because oil is genuinely dripping from the rear of your engine, the whole thing is visually convincing enough that most people just sign and pay. Here is what they never tell you, and here is what the entire racket depends on: you never learning. On virtually every Toyota 4-cylinder and 6-cylinder engine built over the last 4 decades, including the legendary 22R, the 2AZ, the 1GR, the 3RZ, and the entire family of modern GR engines, there sits a small rubber plug at the very back of the cylinder head. Toyota engineers call it a camshaft end plug, though many technicians who actually like their customers call it a cam plug or a half-moon seal. It is roughly the size of a large coin. It is made of rubber. It costs between $4 and $6, and it is pressed directly into a precision bore machined into the very rearmost face of the cylinder head, sitting at the highest point on the back of the entire engine assembly. To understand why this tiny plug is so dangerous to your wallet, you need to understand basic oil pressure physics inside your engine. When your Toyota is running, the oiling system is pressurized. Oil is forced through every passage in the cylinder head, lubricating the camshaft journals, the rocker arms, and every moving component in the valve train. That pressurized oil fills the entire cavity behind the camshaft, right up to the very last bearing journal. The cam plug is the only thing standing between all of that pressurized oil and the open atmosphere behind your engine. It is the final seal on the entire top end of your motor. Now, rubber is not immortal. Heat cycles, the constant expansion and contraction of metal, the slow degradation of the rubber compound over years of thermal stress, these forces cause that small plug to shrink, harden, crack, and eventually lose its interference fit inside the bore. When that happens, pressurized oil from inside the head finds the path of least resistance. It seeps past the degraded plug, exits the back of the cylinder head at the highest possible point on the engine, and then does exactly what gravity demands. It runs straight down the rear face of the engine block in a slow, persistent rivulet. It pools, it spreads. It coats the bell housing, the transmission interface, and it drips directly onto the exhaust pipe below, where it burns and smokes with every drive cycle. From the outside, from the perspective of someone who is not looking for a $5 rubber plug, this looks exactly, perfectly, and completely indistinguishably like a blown head gasket or a failed rear main seal. The location is right. The burn smell is right. The persistent drip is right. The visual footprint is a forensic copy of what a catastrophic internal failure looks like. This is not an accident. It is not a coincidence. The geometry of Toyota's engine architecture virtually guarantees that a failed cam plug will present itself as something far more severe. And the repair industry, from independent shops to factory dealerships, has quietly and systematically chosen not to educate consumers about this distinction because the financial incentive to skip past the $5 answer and land directly on the $2,800 answer is, by any honest measure, enormous. Toyota introduced this style of pressed rubber cam plug design, beginning in earnest, with the production engines of the late 1970s and early 1980s. The engineering logic was sound and genuinely elegant. Rather than extending the cylinder head casting to accommodate a bolted end cap, which would add weight, machining complexity, and additional gasket surfaces, Toyota's engineers used a precision-pressed bore and a simple rubber plug to seal the camshaft cavity. It was clean. It was light. It was cheap to manufacture. And under normal conditions, with routine maintenance and reasonable service intervals, those plugs were perfectly adequate for the intended service life of the original engine. Toyota's internal documents from that era reflect a design philosophy centered on simplicity, and the cam plug was a textbook expression of that philosophy. What changed was not the engineering. What changed was the business model surrounding the vehicle after it left the factory. As Toyota built a reputation for bulletproof longevity, their vehicles began outliving every projection the original engineers had made. Trucks and forerunners from the 1980s were still running in the early 2000s, then in the 2010s, and are still running today. The rubber in those cam plugs was never formulated to last 30 or 40 years of heat cycles. But the labor and parts revenue model at dealerships was formulated around exactly that kind of long-term vehicle ownership, and the rear oil leak that a degraded cam plug produces became, over time, one of the most reliable and repeatable sources of high-dollar misdiagnosis in the Toyota service network. Fleet maintenance companies and independent engineers who documented this pattern across large vehicle populations found that the cam plug was the source of rear engine oil contamination in a statistically significant majority of cases, where a head gasket or rear main seal had been the initial diagnosis. The numbers, reviewed against actual teardown evidence from engines that were pulled based on those diagnoses, told a story that the dealership industry had every financial reason to ignore. Now, here is what you are going to do about it, and you are going to do it today before you let anyone touch your engine. You are going to need a flathead screwdriver, a clean rag, a bottle of brake cleaner or equivalent solvent, a tube of genuine Toyota FIPG sealant, which stands for Form in Place Gasket, and which you can buy at any Toyota dealership parts counter or online for roughly $12 to $15, and a new rubber cam plug for your specific engine, which will cost you between $4 and $6 and is available at any major auto parts retailer or online. Park the vehicle, let the engine cool completely, and open the hood. You are working at the very back of the engine, at the junction where the engine meets the firewall. On most Toyota applications, you will need to move aside a few hoses or the air intake ducting to give yourself room to reach. You are looking for the small circular rubber plug pressed into the very rearmost face of the cylinder head, typically just above the valve cover gasket line. Take your flathead screwdriver and carefully pry around the edge of the plug. Apply light, even pressure. The plug has been in there for years, and the rubber is hardened, so it will resist at first, but it will come free. Once it is out, inspect the bore, which is the circular hole it was seated in. Use your rag and a spray of brake cleaner to completely clean the bore surface and the surrounding metal. Remove every trace of old oil, old rubber residue, and oxidation. The metal surface needs to be dry and clean for the sealant to bond correctly. Take your tube of Toyota FIPG sealant and apply a thin, continuous bead around the outside circumference of your new rubber plug. You do not need to overload it. A consistent thin bead is the correct application. Press the new plug firmly and evenly into the bore until it is flush with the surrounding surface. It should seat with a satisfying resistance. Wipe away any sealant that squeezed out around the edges. Allow the sealant to cure for a minimum of 1 hour before starting the engine, though overnight is better. That is it. That is the entire repair. You have permanently resolved a rear engine oil leak that a dealership was prepared to charge you nearly $3,000 to fix. The total cost of your repair is under $20. The total time is under 20 minutes. If you are watching this and you already paid for a head gasket replacement and the leak came back, I want you to sit with that for a moment, because that happens. And shops pull the head, replace the gasket, button everything back up, and the leak returns within weeks, because the cam plug was never addressed and they never looked for it in the first place. The industry hates this information. Not because it is wrong, but because it is right, and it is freely shareable, and every single person you send this video to is someone who will never fall for this diagnostic fraud again. Share this. Send it to every Toyota owner you know. Post it in every truck and SUV forum you can find. The tool that defeats a $2,800 scam is knowledge, and right now you have it. And stay close, because in the next video, I am going to show you the specific 17-digit VIN decoder pattern that tells you whether your exact Toyota was built with a factory oiling circuit defect that dealerships have been internally aware of since 2009, and why the extended warranty coverage that would have fixed it for free was quietly allowed to expire before most owners ever found out it existed.